still remember the exact moment my world shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a casual phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. While I was reviewing quarterly reports at my desk, my mother's voice sounded unusually chipper, almost rehearsed, like she'd been practicing what to say. "Sweetheart, your father and I have some exciting news," she began, and I could hear my dad murmuring something in the background. "We've made a decision about the lake house. We're selling it." My hand froze halfway to my coffee cup. The lake house. Our lake house? The place where I'd spent every summer since I was 7 years old. Where I'd learned to swim in water so clear you could see your toes wiggling 10 feet down. Where my grandmother had taught me to make her famous blueberry pie on rainy afternoons. Where I'd scattered her ashes 5 years ago, watching them drift across the water she loves so much. What? I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're selling it, honey. We've already accepted an offer, actually. The closing is in 3 weeks. Isn't that wonderful? The market is so hot right now, and we got an incredible price. Your father and I can finally take that European river cruise we've been talking about." The words hit me like physical blows. Already accepted an offer. 3 weeks. They'd made this decision, negotiated with buyers, signed papers, all without a single word to me. "Mom, you can't be serious. That house has been in our family for 35 years. Grandma left it to all of us. You, Dad, and me. Don't I get a say in this?" There was a pause, and I could hear her discussing something with my father, their voices muffled as if she'd covered the phone with her hand. When she came back, her tone had shifted from chipper to defensive. "Well, technically, yes. The house is in all our names. But your father and I are the majority owners. We each have 40%, and you only have 20. We can make this decision without you, legally speaking." Our lawyer confirmed it. Our lawyer. They'd consulted a lawyer. They'd planned this, strategized it, made sure they had every legal right to cut me out of the decision entirely. "I can't believe you're doing this," I said, my throat tightening. "That house means everything to me. It's not just property. It's, oh, Emma, don't be so dramatic," my mother interrupted, her voice taking on that condescending tone I'd heard throughout my childhood whenever I expressed an emotion she found inconvenient. "It's just a house. You're 32 years old. It's time to stop being so sentimental about childhood memories. This is a smart financial decision. You should be thanking us for getting such a good price in this market." "Does the buyer know it's a 3-way ownership?" I asked, grasping for anything that might slow this train down. "Of course. Everything is completely legal and above board. You'll get your share of the proceeds, 20% of the sale price after closing costs. That should be around $70,000. You can use it for a down payment on your own vacation property if you want." $70,000. She was talking about my grandmother's legacy, about 3.5 decades of family history, about the place that held my most precious memories, like it was just a stock we were cashing out. "I need to go," I said abruptly and ended the call before she could respond. I sat there in my office, staring at the city skyline through my window, feeling like the ground had opened up beneath me. My parents had always been practical people, sometimes to the point of coldness, but this felt like a betrayal of a magnitude I'd never experienced. They hadn't just made a decision about property. They'd erased my voice, dismissed my feelings, and reduced something irreplaceable to a line item in their retirement budget. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering. The lake house wasn't just some vacation spot we'd visited occasionally. After my grandmother moved in there full-time when I was 12, I had spent almost every weekend there during my teenage years. While my parents worked constantly, climbing their respective corporate ladders, Grandma Rose had been my actual parent. She'd listened to my problems, celebrated my victories, taught me to be strong and independent. When she got sick during my senior year of college, I had taken a semester off to care for her. My parents had disapproved, said I was being impractical, that I should hire a nurse and focus on my education. But I'd done it anyway because she'd been there for me when they weren't. I'd sat with her on the porch overlooking the lake during her final weeks, holding her hand, listening to her stories about her own youth, about her dreams and regrets. This place is magic, Emma, she'd whispered to me one evening as the sun set over the water, painting everything gold and pink. It's where I found myself after your grandfather died. It's where I found peace. Promise me you'll take care of it. Promise me you won't let it become just another thing to buy and sell. I'd promised. And now, barely 5 years after her death, my parents were breaking that promise for a European cruise. The next morning, I called my cousin Derek, who was a real estate attorney in Boston. I explained the situation, my voice shaking with a mixture of grief and anger. Legally, they're right, he said after I'd finished. With 80% ownership between them, they can force a sale even if you object. You could fight it in court, argue for partition in kind instead of sale. But honestly, Emma, that would cost you tens of thousands in legal fees, take months or even years. And you'd probably lose anyway. The courts generally favor partition by sale when co-owners can't agree. So I just have to accept this. There's nothing I can do. Derek was quiet for a moment. I didn't say that. There are always options, just not necessarily legal ones. How badly do you want to keep that house? Derek, I'd do anything. Then let me ask you this, how much do you trust your parents to keep their word? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, if you could somehow block the sale, or make it impossible to complete, would they come after you legally? Would they sue their own daughter? I thought about it. My parents were ruthless in business, but family lawsuits were messy, public, embarrassing. They cared deeply about their reputation in their social circles. No, I said slowly. They'd be furious, but they wouldn't sue me. It would make them look terrible. Then you might have more leverage than you think. But Emma, what I'm about to suggest is, let's call it ethically gray. Are you prepared to play hardball with your own parents? I thought about my grandmother's hand in mine, about promises made on a porch overlooking still water, about 35 years of memories being erased for a cruise ship vacation. Tell me what to do. I said. Derek laid out a plan that was risky, potentially relationship destroying, and absolutely brilliant. It hinged on a legal technicality and my willingness to move faster than my parents could react. I'd need to act immediately, be prepared for their fury, and accept that this might permanently damage my relationship with them. But as I sat there, listening to Derek's strategy, I realized something important. My relationship with my parents had always been transactional. They loved me in their way, but they'd never truly seen me, never prioritized my feelings over their convenience. They were doing exactly what they'd always done, making decisions that benefited them, and expecting me to fall in line. Maybe it was time they learned I wasn't that obedient daughter anymore. Let's do it, I said. The first step was simple, but required perfect timing. I needed to cloud the title to the property before the closing date, making it legally impossible to sell without resolving my claim. Derek helped me file what's called a lis pendens, a notice of pending legal action that gets recorded against the property and warns potential buyers that there's a legal dispute over ownership. But here's where Derek's brilliance came in. Instead of filing a straightforward partition action that I'd likely lose, he crafted a lawsuit claiming that my grandmother's will had been improperly executed, and that the lake house should have gone entirely to me, not split 3 ways. This was technically true. There had been some irregularities in how the will was witnessed, though probably not enough to actually win a case. But that didn't matter. What mattered was creating enough legal uncertainty to scare off the buyers and halt the sale. We filed the lawsuit and the list pendants on a Friday afternoon, 3 days after my mother's phone call. The beauty of this timing was that the title company wouldn't discover the filing until Monday at the earliest, giving me the weekend to prepare for the fallout. That Sunday evening, I received the call I'd been expecting. "What the hell have you done?" My father's voice thundered through the phone. I'd never heard him this angry. "Our lawyer just called. You've filed a lawsuit against us, against your own parents. I'm not suing you, Dad. I'm challenging the validity of Grandma's will. There's a difference. This is the same thing, and you know it. The title company says they can't close on the sale now. The buyers are threatening to walk away. Do you have any idea how much money you're costing us?" "About the same amount it would cost me to lose the house forever," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. Funny how money only matters when it's your money. I could hear my mother in the background, her voice shrill, demanding he put her on speaker. "Emma Rose Mitchell, you drop this ridiculous lawsuit immediately," she said, using my full name like I was a misbehaving child. "This is extortion. This is financial abuse." I almost laughed at the irony. "Mom, you made a major decision about my inheritance without even consulting me. You told me to just accept it because you had the legal right. Now I'm exercising my legal rights. What's the problem?" "The problem is you're being spiteful and vindictive," my father said. "This isn't about the house. This is about you throwing a tantrum because you didn't get your way. No, Dad. This is about me refusing to let you erase Grandma Rose from our lives like she never mattered. This is about keeping a promise I made to her while she was dying, a promise to protect the place. That meant everything to her. Your grandmother has been dead for 5 years." My mother said coldly, "She doesn't care what happens to that house. Dead people don't have feelings, Emma." The cruelty of that statement took my breath away. This was the woman who'd given birth to me, and she couldn't understand why I'd want to honor my grandmother's memory. "Maybe dead people don't have feelings, Mom, but I do, and I'm not dropping this lawsuit." "Then you're out of the will," my father said flatly. "You hear me? You're disinherited. You won't get a single penny when we die. That's your choice to make," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Just like selling the lake house was your choice to make. And filing this lawsuit is mine." I ended the call and immediately turned off my phone. My hands were shaking. I'd just effectively declared war on my own parents, and there was no going back now. Over the next week, the situation escalated in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. The buyers did walk away from the sale. The wife apparently had her own lawyer, who advised against closing on a property with contested ownership. My parents' attorney sent me a cease and desist letter threatening to sue me for tortious interference with contract. Derek sent back a letter explaining that my lawsuit was legitimate and that any action against me would be countered with a claim that my parents had breached their fiduciary duty to me as a co-owner by trying to sell without my meaningful consent. Legal posturing, Derek called it. A chess game played with threatening letters instead of pieces. But the real warfare was happening in my family. My mother called my aunts and uncles, painting me as an ungrateful daughter who was attacking her own parents out of greed. She conveniently left out the part where they tried to sell my grandmother's house without my input. Several family members reached out to me, some sympathetic, others accusatory. My Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, called me one evening. "Emma, I don't know what's gotten into you," she said. "Your mother is devastated. She's crying every day. Your father has developed stress-related chest pains. Is the house really worth destroying your family? Aunt Linda, did Mom tell you they accepted an offer on the lake house without even mentioning it to me? There was a pause. Well, she said you were consulted. She told me 3 weeks before closing, after everything was already decided. They consulted a lawyer to make sure they could legally cut me out of the decision. Another pause. Longer this time. That does seem. I didn't know it happened like that. They're not telling people the whole story. They're making me look like the villain because I won't just accept having my inheritance sold out from under me. Aunt Linda sighed. Your mother has always been practical. Sometimes too practical. After your grandmother died, she was so eager to move on, to stop talking about Rose. Like grief was something to be scheduled and completed efficiently. It bothered me then. I should have said something. It's not too late, I said quietly. What do you mean? I mean, this doesn't have to end with the house being sold. There's another option, but I need leverage. I need them to come to the table willing to actually negotiate, instead of just demanding I surrender. What kind of leverage? I explained my thinking. The lawsuit had stopped the sale, but it wasn't a long-term solution. Eventually, a judge would likely dismiss my claims about the will, and we'd be back where we started. But right now, in this moment, I had something my parents desperately wanted: a clear title so they could sell the property. They also had something I wanted: the ability to buy out their shares. The problem was money. My 20% stake would sell for about $70,000. To buy out my parents' 80%, I'd need around $280,000, plus closing costs. I had about $50,000 in savings, and I could maybe get a small loan, but not nearly enough, unless I got creative. Aunt Linda, how much did Mom tell you they were selling the house for? I think she said $350,000, and they were going to use the money for a European cruise and some retirement fund investments. Right, that's what she said. What if I could offer them something better? Not cash, but something they'd value even more? Aunt Linda was quiet, and I could practically hear the gears turning. My aunt had always been the creative one in the family, the problem solver. What are you thinking? I laid out my idea. It was audacious, possibly crazy, but it might work. And the beauty of it was that it would give my parents what they actually wanted: not the money itself, but what the money represented: status, prestige, the ability to show off to their country club friends. My parents were deeply invested in their social standing. They belonged to an exclusive club, attended charity galas, donated to the right causes. My father sat onto corporate boards. My mother chaired a hospital fundraising committee. Their entire identity was wrapped up in being seen as successful, philanthropic, cultured. What if I could give them something that would boost their social status more than a few $100,000 in their retirement account ever could? I worked for a major tech company in a senior marketing role. More importantly, I'd recently been headhunted by 3 different firms, including a very prestigious consulting company that worked with Fortune 500 clients. I turned down their offers because I was happy where I was, but I'd maintained good relationships with the recruiters. One of those recruiters, Allison Chen, had mentioned during our last conversation that her firm was always looking for high net worth clients to sponsor their annual charitable gala and exclusive event that drew celebrities, politicians, and business leaders. Sponsorship packages started at $50,000 and came with prominent recognition, premium seating, and significant social cachet. What if I could leverage my professional connections to get my parents something they couldn't buy on their own: access to a social circle that had previously been closed to them? Over the next 3 days, I made calls and sent emails. I reached out to Allison and explained that I had potential sponsors interested in her firm's gala. I contacted 3 other professional connections who run exclusive events and organizations. I pulled together a package of opportunities that would cost me in favors and reputation, but wouldn't require me to come up with hundreds of thousands in cash. Then I had Derek draft a settlement proposal. I would drop my lawsuit and allow the sale of the lake house to proceed, but with new terms. Instead of selling to outside buyers, my parents would sell the entire property to me for $1, taking back a promissory note for $280,000. I would pay them back over 10 years at market interest rates, in exchange for accepting this owner-financed arrangement instead of an immediate cash payout. I would provide them with the following. 1. A platinum sponsorship package at Allison's firm's gala, including prominent program recognition, a private reception with keynote speakers, and premium seating value of $75,000, which I would secure through my professional relationships and calling in favors. 2. Introduction and recommendation to the board of a prestigious arts foundation that my former boss chaired, with a strong likelihood of my parents being invited to join the associate board, value incalculable. In terms of social status. 3. Use of a luxury vacation property in Tuscany for 2 weeks every summer for the next 5 years, owned by my boyfriend's family, who I'd been dating for 8 months and who'd agreed to this arrangement. When I explained the situation, equivalent value of approximately $60,000 over 5 years for monthly payments on the promissory note that would actually give them more money over 10 years than they'd get from selling to outside buyers once you factored in investment returns at current interest rates. The genius of this proposal was that it gave my parents everything they actually wanted: money, prestige, luxury travel, social advancement, while allowing me to keep the lake house in the family. It would cost me enormous social capital, tie me to a decade of debt payments, and require me to humble myself and ask for favors from people I'd kept at professional arm's length. But it would work. I knew it would work because I knew my parents. They'd claimed to be about fiscal responsibility and smart investments, but what they really cared about was impressing their friends and climbing social ladders. Derek sent the proposal to their attorney on a Wednesday. By Friday, I'd received a call from my mother. Her voice was different this time. Not angry, not condescending. Cautious. "Emma, we've reviewed your proposal, and it's creative. Your father is concerned about the promissory note. What if you can't make the payments? Then you foreclose and sell the property, just like any lender would. Derek has included standard protections for you. Plus, you've seen my income statements. I make more than enough to cover these payments. The real question is whether you trust me to honor my commitments." My mother was quiet for a long moment. "That gala sponsorship, your father looked into it. It's usually only offered to major corporations and very wealthy individuals. How did you secure it?" I called in professional favors. Multiple favors. The kind you only get to use once. For a house? For Grandma's house. For my promise to her. Yes, I could hear her discussing something with my father. Their voice is muffled. When she came back, she sounded almost subdued. "The Tuscany property. Is that from Marcus's family?" Marcus was my boyfriend, and my mother had met him twice. She'd been impressed that his family owned several properties in Europe, had old money, the kind of background she wished she'd come from. "Yes. He's been very understanding about all of this." "Emma, why are you doing this? Why go to such lengths? It's just property." I thought about lying, about giving her an answer she could understand. Instead, I told her the truth. "Mom, when Grandma was dying, you and Dad visited her exactly 3 times in those final 2 months. You were busy with work, with your lives. I get it. But I was there almost every day. I saw her pain, her fear, her gradual letting go of the world. And in those quiet moments, She told me things about how she felt invisible to you and Dad after Grandpa died, how she felt like a burden, how that lake house was the only place she felt like herself. She made me promise to take care of it, not because it's valuable, but because it represented the life she built for herself when everyone else had moved on. When she scattered Grandpa's ashes there, when she planted that garden, when she sat on that porch watching the sunset, she was claiming space in the world for herself. She was saying, I matter. My life has meaning beyond being someone's mother and grandmother. So now, Mom, it's not just property to me. It's the physical embodiment of a woman's dignity and self-determination. It's proof that she existed as a complete person, not just in relation to other people. And I'm not going to let that be erased for a cruise ship vacation, no matter how good the deal is. The silence that followed was so long I thought the call had dropped. I didn't know you felt that way, my mother finally said, her voice thick. I didn't know she'd said those things to you. You didn't ask. You never ask, Mom. You tell me what to think, what to feel, what to do, but you never ask. That's not fair, Emma. Your father and I have always, Mom, please. Can we just talk about the proposal? I don't have the energy for the other conversation right now. Another long pause. Then, your father and I need to discuss this. We'll have our attorney respond by Monday. Okay, Emma, for what it's worth. I'm sorry we didn't tell you before we accepted the offer. Your father thought it would be easier if it was already decided. He thought you'd just accept it and move on. I know. That's the problem. That weekend felt like the longest of my life. I played my hand completely. If my parents rejected the proposal, I had no backup plan. The lawsuit would eventually fail, and I'd be forced to accept the 20% buyout. I'd lose the house, damage my relationship with my parents beyond repair, and have nothing to show for it except the knowledge that I tried. Marcus drove up from the city on Saturday to check on me. We sat on my apartment balcony, drinking wine and watching the sunset. You know, when you first told me about all this, I thought you were being a bit irrational, he said carefully. A house is a house, you know? But then you showed me the photos, told me the stories, and I got it. It's not about real estate. No, it's not. But Emma, what if they say no? What if you lose it anyway? I'd been asking myself the same question. Then at least I fought. At least I didn't just accept them steamrolling over me like I've done my whole life. At least I kept my promise to Grandma, even if I ultimately couldn't fulfill it. Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. You're stronger than you think. I hope you know that. Monday morning came. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with an email from Derek. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding. The email had one line. They accepted. Call me. I called him immediately, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. They accepted everything. I asked everything. They want to move forward with the settlement. Emma, you did it. You're going to own that house outright once the promissory note is paid off. I leaned against the wall, suddenly dizzy. I'd done it. Against all odds, despite my parents' majority ownership. Despite the legal deck being stacked against me, I'd found a way to keep my grandmother's house. There's one condition, Derek continued. Your mother wants to talk to you, in person, before we finalize everything. My stomach clenched. Did she say what about? No. But Emma, you should do it. You've won the war. The least you can do is hear her out. I agreed to meet my mother for lunch the following Saturday at a quiet restaurant, halfway between our cities. I arrived early, nervous despite my victory. When she walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked, older somehow, more fragile than I'd ever seen her. We ordered food neither of us would eat much of. Then my mother did something I'd never seen her do in my entire life. She cried. Not delicate tears, but deep, shaking sobs that she tried to hide behind her napkin. Mom, what? I read your grandmother's journals, she said, her voice breaking. After you filed the lawsuit, I was so angry I went through all her things we'd boxed up, looking for, I don't know what, evidence that you were wrong, I suppose. Instead, I found 5 years of journals where she wrote about feeling invisible to me, about how I'd become just like my father, all business, no heart, about how she worried that I was raising you the same way and how grateful she was that you turned out different despite my influence. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks. She was afraid to tell me how much the lake house meant to her, because she thought I'd dismiss it as sentimental nonsense. She was right. I would have, and that breaks my heart, Emma. My own mother couldn't talk to me about what mattered to her because she knew I wouldn't care. I didn't know what to say. I had never seen my mother vulnerable like this, never seen her confront her own flaws so directly. When your father and I decided to sell, I told myself it was practical, smart financial planning. But reading those journals, I realized I was doing exactly what she'd feared. I was erasing her, reducing her life to a transaction, and I was doing it to you too, telling you your feelings didn't matter, that you were being dramatic, that you should just accept what we decided. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. I don't know how to be different, Emma. I don't know how to be the kind of mother who asks instead of tells. But I want to learn, and I think keeping this house is the right thing. Not because of the money or the deal you've worked out, but because it matters to you. Because you're willing to go into debt and sacrifice professionally to honor a promise you made to someone you loved. That means something. That should mean something. I squeezed her hand, my own tears starting to fall. Mom, I don't need you to change completely. I just need you to see me, to hear me, to treat my feelings like they're as valid as yours. I know, and I'll try. I can't promise I'll always succeed, but I'll try. We sat there crying together in a quiet restaurant. Years of unspoken hurt finally being acknowledged. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, and it wasn't a complete transformation of our relationship, but it was a beginning, a small crack in the walls we'd both built. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. I became the sole owner of the lake house, subject to a 10-year promissory note to my parents. The gala sponsorship came through. Allison pulled strings and made it happen. Though she made it clear I owed her a professional favor I'd probably spend years repaying. The Arts Foundation welcomed my parents to their associate board. Marcus's family graciously offered their Tuscany property for the agreed-upon time. Everything had worked out, but it had cost me. Not just in money and favors, but in the irrevocable changing of my family dynamics. My father and I were still distant. He felt I'd embarrassed him, forced his hand, played games instead of just accepting the natural order of their authority. He might never fully forgive me for that, but my mother and I started having real conversations. Difficult ones, sometimes painful ones, but real. She asked me about my work, my relationship with Marcus, my dreams for the future. She told me about her own mother, about regrets she carried, about the ways her father had raised her to value success over connection. It wasn't perfect. We still argued. She still sometimes dismissed my feelings or tried to override my decisions. But now, when I called her on it, she'd stop. She'd apologize. She tried to do better. The first weekend after everything was finalized, I drove up to the lake house alone. I walked through each room, touching the walls, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and lake water and old wood. I sat on the porch where I'd sat with my grandmother during her final weeks, watching the sunset over water so still it looked like glass. I kept my promise, Grandma. I whispered to the evening air. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't pretty, but I kept it. I swear I could feel her presence, could almost hear her voice on the wind. You did more than keep a promise, sweet girl. You found your voice. You learned to fight for what matters. That's worth more than any house. And maybe that was the real victory. Not the legal settlement or the creative financing or even keeping the house itself. The real victory was learning that I didn't have to accept other people's decisions about my life. That I could say no. That I could fight back, even against people who'd held power over me my entire life. That I could take a risk they never expected and win. I still make the monthly payments to my parents. Every payment is a reminder of what I fought for and what it cost. The house needs repairs I can barely afford. The property taxes are higher than I'd like. Sometimes I lie awake at night worried about making ends meet. About whether I made the right choice taking on so much debt for a piece of property. But then I drive up on a Friday evening after a hard week of work. I open the door and smell the familiar scent of home. I sit on that porch and watch the sun set over the same water my grandmother loved. I tend the garden she planted, cook in the kitchen where she taught me to make pie, swim in the cove where I learned to trust the water to hold me up. And I know, beyond any doubt, that I made the right choice. Because some things aren't about money or practicality or smart financial planning. Some things are about honoring the people who shaped us, about keeping promises to the dead, about standing up for what matters even when the cost is high. Some things are about looking at the people who've always made decisions for you and saying, clearly and firmly, not this time, not about this. This is mine, and I'm keeping it. That's the risk I took. The risk of fighting back, of demanding to be heard. Of refusing to be practical when my heart was screaming that practicality was the wrong answer. And in the end, it was the risk that changed everything.